A little girl stops Millionaire's flight. She'll crash the plane. He kneels in tears. Before anything else, tap like if you believe inner warmth radiates change. Enjoy the story. The morning sun painted the private airfield in shades of gold and amber, its rays catching the polished aluminum skin of Ryan Carter's Cessna Citation like scattered diamonds. At 45, Ryan carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had built an aviation empire from nothing more than a dream and an unshakable belief in the power of flight. His dark hair, now threaded with silver that spoke of recent sorrows no amount of success could heal, caught the breeze as he performed his final pre-flight inspection. The scent of jet fuel mingled with the crisp morning air, creating that distinctive airport perfume that had always meant freedom to Ryan. Today, it was supposed to mean healing, a romantic getaway with his new wife, a chance to finally move beyond the devastating grief that had consumed him since Sarah's death 3 years ago. "Everything's perfect, darling," Clara West called from the aircraft's entrance, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to command. At 38, she possessed the kind of sharp, controlled beauty that turned heads. Angular cheekbones, platinum blonde hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, and ice-blue eyes that seemed to see everything while revealing nothing. Her pilot's uniform was immaculate, every crease sharp enough to cut glass, every button and badge positioned with military precision. Clara moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent 15 years in military aviation, her every gesture calculated and purposeful. Where Sarah had been all warmth and spontaneous laughter, Clara was composed reliability personified. Perhaps that's what had drawn Ryan to her. After drowning in the chaos of grief and single parenthood, Clara's stability had felt like solid ground beneath his feet. "The weather's absolutely perfect for our mountain retreat," Clara continued, her smile as precisely calibrated as her appearance. "Clear skies, minimal turbulence, and we'll have complete privacy once we reach the cabin." Ryan returned her smile, though something indefinable flickered in his chest. Not quite doubt, but not quite certainty either. He'd built his fortune on trusting his instincts, but grief had a way of clouding judgment, making a man question everything he thought he knew about love, trust, and the future. The Citation gleamed in the morning light, its sleek lines representing not just transportation but transformation. The promise of leaving painful memories behind and embracing a future that didn't revolve around loss. Ryan had personally overseen every detail of the aircraft's maintenance, every system check, every safety protocol. Flying had taken Sarah from him, but had also given him everything he'd ever achieved. It was impossible to hate something that had shaped his entire life. But as Ryan took his first confident step toward the aircraft, a voice shattered the morning stillness like breaking glass. "Daddy, no. Don't get on that plane." The words carried across the tarmac with the piercing clarity of absolute terror. Ryan's head snapped up to see Emily Chun Carter racing toward him, her small legs pumping frantically, her long black hair streaming behind her like a banner of desperation. At 8 years old, Emily was all sharp angles and fierce intelligence, her mixed Asian and European heritage creating a face that was both delicate and determined, beautiful and uncompromising. "Emily, what in God's name are you doing here?" Ryan caught his daughter as she crashed into him with the full force of her small body, her thin arms wrapping around his waist with desperate strength. "You're supposed to be at home with Mrs. Rosa. How did you even get here?" Emily's dark eyes, so much like her mother's, so filled with that same intuitive brilliance that had made Sarah such a formidable partner in both life and business, blazed with urgent purpose. "Daddy, you can't fly with her. You can't trust her. She's going to crash the plane. She's going to hurt you." The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence, heavy and ominous. Ryan felt his blood chill, not from fear, but from the acute embarrassment of having his 8-year-old daughter publicly accuse his wife of attempted murder. Clara stood frozen in the aircraft doorway, her expression hidden behind designer sunglasses, but Ryan could feel her watching, calculating, measuring his response. "Emily, that's enough," Ryan said quietly, his voice carrying the exhaustion of a widower who had spent 3 years trying to balance grief, single parenthood, and the crushing responsibility of running a multi-million-dollar company. You're being incredibly disrespectful to Clara. She's an excellent pilot with 15 years of military experience and a perfect safety record. But Daddy, Emily's voice cracked with the desperation of a child who knew she was right but lacked the words to make adults understand. No buts, sweetheart. Ryan's tone softened slightly, but remained firm. I know you're still adjusting to having Clara in our family. Change is hard, especially after losing Mommy. But these accusations are completely inappropriate and, frankly, they're embarrassing. The words hit Emily like physical blows, and Ryan immediately regretted his harshness. But the stress of the past few years, building a new relationship while raising a grieving child, managing a company while processing his own trauma, trying to balance Emily's needs with his desperate desire for companionship, had left him with little patience for what appeared to be another episode of Emily's resistance to his remarriage. Clara descended the aircraft steps with fluid grace, her heels clicking against the metal with military precision. She moved like a dancer, every gesture controlled and purposeful, radiating the kind of calm competence that had first attracted Ryan to her. Kneeling to Emily's eye level with perfect composure, Clara's voice carried just the right note of understanding concern. "Sweetheart, I completely understand why you're worried about your daddy," Clara said, her tone a masterclass in stepmother diplomacy. "Flying can seem scary when you don't fully understand how safe modern aircraft really are. But I want you to know that I've been flying for 15 years, military jets, commercial aircraft, private planes like this one. I've never had so much as a rough landing, let alone an accident." Emily's small hands clenched into fists at her sides, her whole body vibrating with frustrated energy. "I'm not scared of flying. I love airplanes. I've been studying them since I was 5. But you," she pointed directly at Clara with the unwavering accusation of absolute certainty. "You're lying about something. I can tell. You're lying about everything." The word struck like lightning, sharp and bright and impossibly dangerous. Ryan felt something twist in his chest. Was it doubt, or just the familiar ache of watching his daughter struggle with changes beyond her control? Emily had always been perceptive, almost unnaturally so. Sarah used to joke that their daughter had been born with built-in radar for detecting deception. But children also saw monsters and shadows, didn't they? Children created elaborate stories to explain changes they couldn't control or understand. Emily Chin Carter. That is absolutely enough. Ryan's voice carried across the tarmac with the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "You will apologize to Clara immediately, and then you will explain to me how you got here and why you thought it was appropriate to leave the house without permission." But Emily didn't apologize. Instead, she grabbed her father's sleeve with both hands, her small knuckles white with the effort of holding on. "Daddy, please. I'm not making this up. I'm not being jealous or difficult. I saw something. I saw her doing something to the plane last night. Something wrong. Something dangerous." The morning breeze carried the scent of jet fuel and the distant promise of rain clouds gathering on the horizon. Ryan looked down at his daughter. So much like Sarah in her stubborn intensity, so much like himself in her passionate love of aviation. Emily had been reading aircraft maintenance manuals since she was 6, could identify different aircraft models from miles away, and understood the principles of flight better than most adults. But children's minds also twisted innocent observations into frightening narratives, especially children who had already lost one parent to what they saw as aviation's betrayal. "Clara," Ryan said finally, his voice carefully neutral, "would you give us a moment to talk privately?" Clara nodded with perfect understanding, her expression radiating the kind of patient compassion that had made Ryan fall in love with her. "Of course, darling. Take all the time you need. Family always comes first. You know I believe that absolutely." She squeezed Ryan's shoulder gently, the gesture carrying years of shared intimacy. "I'll be in the cockpit running through the pre-flight checklist. There's no rush at all." As Clara disappeared into the aircraft with professional efficiency, Ryan knelt before his daughter, placing gentle hands on her thin shoulders. Emily's face was flushed with emotion, her dark eyes bright with unshed tears of frustration and fear. Emily, look at me. Look directly at me and tell me exactly what you think you saw. Clara emerged from the cockpit with practiced efficiency, removing her headset and placing it precisely on the designated hook. Every movement was economical, professional, designed to inspire confidence. She'd changed from her arrival outfit into her full pilot's uniform, navy blue with gold stripes, insignia indicating her rank and certifications, the kind of authoritative presence that commanded respect in any aviation environment. All systems are green, darling, Clara announced, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had spent years making life-and-death decisions in military aircraft. Weather conditions are perfect, flight plan is filed and approved, and we're cleared for takeoff whenever you're ready. Ryan studied his wife's face carefully, searching for any hint of deception, any microscopic tell that might support Emily's accusations. Clara met his gaze steadily, her expression open and patient, radiating the kind of loving concern that had made him fall in love with her in the first place. She was beautiful in a sharp, controlled way, nothing like Sarah's warm spontaneity and emotional transparency, but perhaps that contrast had been part of the appeal. After Sarah's chaotic death in that horrific plane crash 3 years ago, Clara's emotional stability had felt like sanctuary. Clara, Emily says she saw you working on the aircraft last night. After hours, using tools, spending considerable time underneath the plane. Clara's expression didn't change dramatically, but Ryan thought he caught a microscopic pause before she responded. The kind of fractional hesitation that might indicate surprise, or calculation, or the momentary scramble of someone buying time to construct a believable explanation. I did stop by the hangar, Clara said smoothly, her voice carrying the perfect note of professional responsibility. I wanted to double-check the weather routing system and run a final inspection on the fuel management computers. You know how particular I am about safety, especially when it comes to flying with precious cargo. She smiled at Emily with what appeared to be genuine affection. I would never take any chances with you or Emily's safety. The explanation sounded reasonable, professional, exactly the kind of thorough preparation that any responsible pilot would undertake. But Emily stepped forward, her small chin raised with defiant determination. Then why were you working on the fuel lines and control cables? Those aren't part of weather routing systems. Clara's composure never wavered, but something shifted in her posture, a subtle straightening that reminded Ryan suddenly of her military background, the way soldiers stand when facing interrogation or challenge. Emily, sweetheart, I'm a certified aircraft mechanic as well as a pilot. I have advanced training in aircraft systems, hydraulics, fuel management, and flight controls. If I noticed something during my inspection that needed attention, of course I would address it immediately. Your father's safety is my primary concern, always. It sounded completely reasonable. It sounded professional and caring and exactly what any loving wife would say. But Emily wasn't backing down, her dark eyes blazing with the kind of determination that Ryan recognized from Sarah's most stubborn moments. That's not what it looked like. And that's not what you were talking about on the phone this morning. The words hung in the air like a blade poised to fall. Clara's expression remained perfectly controlled, but Ryan thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Surprise, annoyance, or perhaps the first hint of something darker. Emily, I think you misunderstood what you heard, Clara said, her voice still patient but carrying a subtle edge. I was discussing our travel plans with the hotel coordinator, talking about how excited I am to finally have this time alone with your father. Ours referred to our honeymoon, our vacation time together. But Emily was prepared for this explanation. Then why did you mention Mr. Herbert? Because you said his name too. You said something about Mr. Herbert and the plan and making sure everything goes exactly right. Ryan felt his world tilt on its axis. Herbert, Richard Herbert, his former aviation consultant, fired 6 months ago for attempting to manipulate safety reports and falsify maintenance records. A man who'd left increasingly threatening voicemails about getting what he deserved and making sure Carter Aviation pays for their mistakes. A man who'd been escorted from the premises by security and legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of any Carter aviation facility. "Clara," Ryan said slowly, his voice carrying the dangerous quiet of a man approaching the edge of his patience. "Why would you be discussing anything with Richard Herbert?" "I wasn't." Clara's response came too quickly, too sharply, lacking the measured professionalism that had characterized her previous answers. "Emily, you're clearly confused about what you heard." Children often misinterpret adult conversations, especially when they're already feeling anxious or uncertain. "I'm not confused." Emily's voice rose with frustration and fear. "I know what I heard. I wrote it down. Mrs. Rosa helped me write down exactly what you said, word for word." The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Mrs. Rosa, their longtime housekeeper and Emily's surrogate grandmother, had been with their family for 15 years. She'd helped Sarah through her pregnancies, had been present for every major milestone in Emily's life, and possessed the kind of intuitive wisdom that came from decades of observing human nature in its most unguarded moments. "You involved Mrs. Rosa in this?" Ryan asked, his voice carrying a mixture of surprise and growing concern. "Mrs. Rosa said that when adults act sneaky, children need to be smarter than the adults think they are," Emily replied with fierce pride. "She said that sometimes bad people count on children being too scared or too polite to speak up. But she taught me that family protects family, no matter what." Clara's mask slipped for just an instant, so briefly that Ryan almost missed it. But in that fractional moment, he saw something that made his blood freeze. Not love, not concern, not even the annoyance of a stepmother dealing with a difficult child. He saw calculation. Cold, predatory calculation. "Ryan," Clara said, her voice regaining its professional composure, "Emily is clearly having some kind of emotional episode. Perhaps we should postpone our trip until she's feeling more stable. I'm concerned about her psychological state." But Emily had started walking toward the aircraft, her small legs carrying her with determined purpose. "Fine. You want proof? I'll show you proof. If you didn't sabotage anything, then you won't mind if I examine the maintenance logs and compare them to the work I saw you doing." "Emily, stop," Ryan called, but his daughter was already climbing the aircraft stairs with the confidence of someone who'd spent countless hours in cockpits and maintenance hangars. "If there's nothing to hide," Emily called back, "then there's nothing to worry about." Clara moved to follow Emily, but Ryan caught her arm. "Let her look. Let her examine whatever she wants to examine. If there's nothing wrong, then there's nothing to find." Something flickered across Clara's face, so briefly that Ryan almost missed it. But in that instant, he saw something that made his blood run cold. He saw calculation. Inside the aircraft, Emily moved with the focused intensity she'd inherited from both parents. Her small hands traced along control panels and inspection ports, comparing what she saw with the detailed aircraft schematics she'd memorized from her technical books. Ryan followed, watching his daughter work with growing amazement. Emily might be only 8, but she understood this aircraft better than most certified mechanics. "Here," Emily said, pointing to a section near the fuel management system. "See this access panel? It's not secured properly. The screws are loose, and there are fresh tool marks on the metal." Ryan examined the panel. Emily was right. Someone had recently worked here, and they hadn't been careful about concealing their access. Clara appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "That panel was inspected during routine maintenance last week. Sometimes screws work loose from vibration." But Emily was already moving, her small frame allowing her to squeeze into spaces where adults couldn't reach. "And here," she called from behind an equipment bay. "Someone cut zip ties and replaced them with new ones. But they used the wrong type. These are electrical ties, not aerospace rated." Ryan's blood chilled. Using non-certified components in aircraft was not just unprofessional. It was potentially catastrophic. "Emily, come out of there," Clara said sharply. "You're going to hurt yourself." But Emily emerged triumphantly, holding a small device Ryan didn't recognize. "And what's this?" "It's not in any of the aircraft manuals, and it's connected to the flight control system." Ryan took the device, his hand shaking slightly. It was small, electronic, with wires leading to critical flight systems. A device that had no business being in his aircraft. Clara, his voice was deadly quiet. What is this? I have no idea. Emily must have. I didn't put it there. Emily's voice cracked with indignation. I found it. She put it there. The accusation hit like a thunderclap. Ryan stared at the device in his hands, then at his wife, then at his daughter. One of them was lying. One of them was trying to kill him. There's more, Emily said, pulling out her phone, a simple device Ryan had given her for emergencies. Mrs. Rosa helped me last night. When I saw Clara at the hangar, Mrs. Rosa said we should record everything, just in case. Ryan's heart stopped. You recorded, Clara? Emily nodded, her small fingers working the phone screen. We were worried about telling you without proof. Adults don't always believe kids, even when we're telling the truth. The phone screen lit up with grainy security footage. Clara's car arriving late at night. Clara entering the hangar with tools. Clara working beneath the aircraft for over an hour. And then, damning beyond doubt, Clara installing the exact device Emily had just found. Oh my God, Ryan whispered. Clara's mask finally slipped. The concern, the patience, the loving stepmother act. It all disappeared, replaced by something cold and predatory. You little brat, Clara snarled at Emily. You don't know what you've just done? Ryan stepped protectively in front of his daughter, the device still clutched in his hand. Clara, what is this? What were you planning to do? Clara laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. What was I planning? Ryan, you're worth more dead than alive. Your company, your patents, your research, it all comes to me as your widow. And poor little Emily here would be so traumatized by losing another parent in a plane crash. The words hit Ryan like physical blows. Another parent? Sarah's crash. That wasn't an accident, was it? Sarah was inconveniently competent, Clara said conversationally. She was getting too close to some irregularities in your overseas contracts. Contracts that Herbert and I had been adjusting for a mutual benefit. Emily gasped, pressing closer to her father. Ryan felt rage building in his chest like a physical force. You killed my wife. I eliminated a problem, just like I'm about to eliminate another one. Ryan's vision blurred with fury and grief. All this time, he'd been mourning Sarah's death as a tragic accident, blaming himself for not being with her, struggling with survivor's guilt and the unfairness of random fate. To discover that her death had been deliberate, calculated, part of a larger plan to destroy his family and steal his life's work. It was almost more than his mind could process. And now you're going to do the same thing to us. I was planning to, Clara said with mock sadness. But your daughter's interference has forced me to modify the plan considerably. Clara moved with the lethal precision of her military training, her hand sliding to something concealed at her belt. Ryan saw the flash of metal and threw himself sideways, pushing Emily behind the aircraft's passenger seats, just as Clara drew a compact pistol from a concealed holster. Nobody moves, Clara commanded, her voice now stripped of all pretense, revealing the cold authority of someone accustomed to life and death situations. Ryan, you're going to sit in that pilot seat and fly this aircraft exactly where I tell you to go. Emily, you're going to sit quietly in the back and watch your father follow orders like a good little puppet. Ryan's mind raced frantically, calculating distances, escape routes, possible ways to protect Emily. But with Clara holding a gun and positioning herself between them and the aircraft door, their options were catastrophically limited. Clara, please, Ryan said, his voice carefully controlled despite the terror clawing at his chest. Whatever you want from me, whatever this is really about, Emily doesn't need to be part of it. She's just a child. She's completely innocent. Oh, but she's not innocent, Clara replied, her voice carrying a chilling note of amusement. Little Emily here has been conducting her own investigation, gathering evidence, building a case against me. She's far too smart and far too dangerous to leave alive. Emily's hand slipped into Ryan's, small and trembling, but determined. Daddy, the emergency transponder is behind seat 4B. If I can reach it without her noticing. If you move 1 inch, little girl, your father dies first, Clara interrupted, her gun never wavering from its target. "And then you'll die slowly, painfully, while I explain to you exactly how your precious mommy screamed when her plane started falling apart around her." The cruelty of the words hit Emily like a physical blow. She made a small sound of anguish, and Ryan felt something break inside his chest. Not again. He couldn't lose another family member to Clara's calculated evil. "Where are we going?" Ryan asked, hoping to buy time while his mind desperately searched for options. "The mountains. Remote, beautiful, perfect for a tragic accident involving a grieving father who couldn't handle the stress of single parenthood and remarriage." Clara's smile was reptilian. "The official story will be that you suffered a psychological breakdown, deliberately crashed the plane with both you and Emily aboard, unable to face the reality of moving on after Sarah's death." Emily's eyes widened with horror. "You're going to make it look like Daddy killed himself?" "And murder-suicide. Very tragic, very believable." Poor Ryan Carter, devastated by his daughter's psychological problems and her accusations against his beloved wife, finally snapped under the pressure. The engines whined to life as Clara forced Ryan to begin the startup sequence, turbines spinning up to operational speed. The familiar sounds that had always meant freedom and adventure now sounded like funeral dirges. "Tower, this is Carter Aviation 1, requesting immediate clearance for departure," Ryan said into his headset, his voice steady despite the circumstances. He tried to inject some subtle code into his transmission, anything that might alert air traffic control to their distress, but Clara was monitoring every word. "Carter 1, you're cleared for takeoff. Have a safe flight, Mr. Carter." If only they knew, Ryan thought grimly. As the aircraft began to roll toward the runway, Ryan caught Emily's eye in the cockpit mirror. His daughter was scared but thinking. He could see her mind working, just like Sarah's used to in crisis situations. Emily was planning something. "Clara," Ryan said as they lifted off, "the police will investigate when we don't return. They'll find the evidence Emily gathered, the recordings, the witness testimony from Mrs. Rosa." "What evidence?" Clara laughed. "You mean the phone that's going to be destroyed in the crash? Or the device that Herbert has already replaced with a legitimate aircraft component while we've been having this conversation?" Ryan's blood turned to ice. "Herbert's here. Herbert's been watching from the terminal, waiting for my signal. By now, he's accessed the hangar using his old security codes, cleaned up any trace of our work, and replaced all the sabotage components with legitimate parts. When investigators examine the wreckage, they'll find nothing but a tragic accident caused by pilot error and psychological distress." The aircraft climbed steadily toward the mountains, leaving behind any hope of rescue or intervention. Ryan tried to think of ways to signal distress without alerting Clara, but she was watching his every move, monitoring every radio transmission. "Daddy," Emily said quietly, "I need to use the bathroom." "Absolutely not," Clara snapped. "You stay exactly where you are. Please, I really need to go. I'm scared, and when I get scared, I always need to." Emily's voice trailed off with childish embarrassment. Clara considered this for a moment, then gestured with her gun. "Fine, but your father comes with you, and I'll be watching every second. Any tricks, any attempt to signal for help, and you both die immediately." Emily stood slowly, her small frame somehow carrying immense dignity despite her terror. As she passed Clara's seat, she stumbled slightly, catching herself against the armrest. "Clumsy child," Clara muttered dismissively, but Ryan saw what Emily had actually done. In her apparent stumble, she'd managed to activate the emergency beacon hidden in the seat's armrest, a silent distress signal that was now broadcasting their location to aviation authorities and emergency services. His 8-year-old daughter was not just brilliant, she was strategically brilliant. The emergency beacon would take time to be noticed and acted upon, but it was a start. Now, they just had to survive long enough for help to arrive. As they climbed toward cruising altitude, Ryan found himself studying Clara's face with new eyes, seeing her not as the woman he'd married, but as the predator she'd always been. The transformation was complete. Gone was any pretense of love, concern, or even basic humanity. What remained was something cold and calculating. A person who viewed other human beings as obstacles to be eliminated or tools to be used. How long? Ryan asked quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a man trying to comprehend the scope of his own betrayal. How long have you been planning this? Clara seemed almost relieved to drop her pretense entirely, as if maintaining the facade of loving stepmother had been exhausting. From the moment I first read about Sarah's death in the aviation trade journals. A wealthy widower in the aircraft manufacturing industry, devastated by tragic loss, left with a small child and a multi-million-dollar company with significant government contracts. You were absolutely perfect. The clinical coldness in her voice made Ryan's skin crawl. You researched me like a target. I researched you like a business opportunity, Clara corrected with chilling precision. It took nearly 2 years of careful positioning to infiltrate your social circle, to build the background and credentials that would pass your security team's investigation. 2 years of playing the role of the dedicated military pilot, looking for love after years of service to her country. Emily sat rigid in her seat, but Ryan could see she was absorbing every word, building a mental record of Claire's confessions. His daughter understood the importance of witness testimony, the need to remember details that might be crucial later. The romance, the engagement, the wedding, all of it was completely fabricated. All of it was strategic investment, Clara replied with matter-of-fact cruelty. Ryan, you're not an evil man, but you're remarkably naive. You wanted so desperately to rebuild your family, to give Emily a mother figure, to recapture some version of the happiness you'd lost. You never questioned why a woman with my background would be genuinely interested in a damaged widower carrying significant emotional baggage. The words stung because they carried uncomfortable truth. After Sarah's death, Ryan had been drowning in grief, guilt, and the overwhelming responsibility of single parenthood while running a demanding business. Clara's apparent interest had felt like salvation, like proof that life could still hold joy and partnership after devastating loss. But Emily was never part of your original plan, was she? Clara's expression darkened with genuine irritation. Emily was supposed to be a minor complication, a grieving child who would accept her new stepmother with appropriate gratitude and eventually be enrolled in an excellent boarding school where she could receive proper education while allowing us to focus on more important matters. More important than raising my daughter? More important than being constantly reminded of your first wife's inconvenient intelligence, Clara snapped. Do you have any idea how exhausting it's been, pretending to care about a child who looks at me with those calculating eyes, who questions everything, who inherited far too much of her mother's intuitive suspicion? Ryan felt a surge of fierce pride in Emily's perceptiveness. She saw through you from the beginning. She sensed something was wrong, but she couldn't articulate what or why. Children often have instinctive reactions to people who represent threats to their family structure. I assumed her resistance was normal adjustment difficulties that would resolve with time and patience. But you underestimated her intelligence. I underestimated her initiative, Clara admitted grimly. I never anticipated that she would conduct active surveillance, gather evidence, or form an alliance with Mrs. Rosa to document my activities. Emily spoke for the first time since the bathroom incident, her voice small but steady. Mrs. Rosa said that bad people always underestimate children and old people. She said that's their biggest weakness. Clara's eyes flashed with anger. Mrs. Rosa is an interfering old woman who should have minded her own business. Mrs. Rosa is family, Emily said with quiet dignity. She raised my mother, and she's been taking care of our family for 15 years. She knows everything about us, everything about our house, everything about the people who come and go. Ryan felt a spark of hope. Mrs. Rosa had been with their family since before Emily's birth, had helped Sarah through the challenges of new motherhood, had been present for every milestone, every crisis, every important moment. She understood their family dynamics better than anyone, would recognize Clara as a threat to their well-being. Mrs. Rosa doesn't matter, Clara said, but her voice carried less certainty than before. By the time anyone thinks to question anything, You'll both be dead, and I'll be the tragic widow grieving the loss of her husband and stepdaughter." But Emily was smiling now. A small, secret smile that reminded Ryan powerfully of Sarah's expression when she'd outmaneuvered a difficult business rival. "What's that look for?" Clara demanded, her voice sharp with suspicion. "You said Herbert cleaned up all the evidence from the hangar, right? Made sure there were no traces of the sabotage work." "Obviously, but he didn't clean up the evidence from your phone conversations. Because Mrs. Rosa wasn't just helping me record you at the hangar last night. She was also recording you in Daddy's study when you thought no one was listening." Clara's face went pale, her confident composure cracking for the first time. "That's impossible. You were asleep upstairs. Rosa was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. Mrs. Rosa taught me and my mommy that sometimes you have to be sneaky to protect your family," Emily said with growing confidence. "She showed me how to move quietly through the house, how to listen at doors without being detected, how to use the house's intercom system to monitor conversations in different rooms." Ryan stared at his daughter with amazement and terror combined. Emily and Mrs. Rosa had been conducting their own counterintelligence operation, building a comprehensive case against Clara while Clara believed she was completely in control of the situation. "Your entire conversation with Herbert about murdering Daddy and taking over the company," Emily continued with satisfaction. "Mrs. Rosa recorded all of it. Every word, every detail, every part of your plan." Clara's gun hand was shaking now, her military composure finally cracking under the weight of unexpected complications. "You're lying. There's no way you could have. Mrs. Rosa came to America when she was 16 with nothing but the clothes on her back," Emily interrupted, her voice carrying a pride that transcended her fear. "She survived things you can't imagine, learned to be invisible when she needed to be, learned to protect the people she loves. She protected my mother from people who wanted to hurt her, and now she's protecting us." The admiration Ryan felt for both Emily and Mrs. Rosa was overwhelming. 2 generations of his family's women, separated by decades, but united in their determination to protect their loved ones, building networks of safety and wisdom that Clara had never suspected existed. And she didn't just save the recordings on one device, Emily added with the triumphant smile of a chess player revealing checkmate. She saved copies everywhere. On her phone, on the house computer, on the cloud storage system, even on old-fashioned cassette tapes that she hid in places you'd never think to look. Clara's face contorted with rage and fear. "It doesn't matter. None of it matters because you're all going to die. Right here, right now, before any of your evidence can be used against me." But as she spoke, Ryan heard something that made his heart leap with desperate hope. In the distance, barely audible over the engine noise, came the unmistakable sound of military aircraft, the high-pitched whine of jet fighters approaching at high speed. Emily's emergency beacon had worked. Help was coming. The F-16 Fighting Falcons appeared off their starboard wing like avenging angels, their sleek forms cutting through the morning sky with lethal precision. There were 2 of them, flying in perfect formation, their presence both beautiful and terrifying. Clara's face went ashen as she realized that Emily's emergency beacon had been successful. Unidentified civilian aircraft, this is Colonel Martinez with the 142nd Fighter Wing operating out of Buckley Air Force Base, came the crisp, authoritative voice over the radio. "You are ordered to immediately return to your point of origin and prepare for emergency landing. Acknowledge immediately." Clara grabbed the radio microphone, her voice switching back to her professional pilot persona with desperate efficiency. "Colonel Martinez, this is a private flight operating under visual flight rules. We are not in distress and do not require assistance. We are simply enjoying a recreational flight to our mountain cabin. Ma'am, we have received an active emergency beacon transmission from your aircraft and reports of potential criminal activity in progress. You will comply with our instructions immediately or we will be forced to take more direct action." Ryan saw his opportunity and leaned toward his microphone. "Colonel, this is Ryan Carter, owner and pilot of this aircraft. I am being held against my will by." Clara struck him viciously across the face with the pistol, opening a deep cut on his cheek that immediately began bleeding. Say another word, and Emily dies first. Then you die slowly. But Emily was no longer the terrified child who had cowered in her seat. The arrival of the military escort had transformed her fear into focused determination. She was moving with purpose, positioning herself near the aircraft's emergency control systems. "Daddy, remember what you taught me about emergency flight procedures? About the backup systems that passengers can use if the pilot becomes incapacitated?" Ryan's eyes widened as he understood Emily's plan. She was positioning herself near the manual flight control override, a backup system designed to give passengers limited control of the aircraft in extreme emergencies. It was a system that required detailed knowledge of aircraft operations, knowledge that Emily had absorbed through years of study and hands-on experience. "Emily, no. It's too dangerous. You're too small to handle those controls." "I'm big enough," Emily said with quiet determination. "And it's more dangerous to let her crash us into the mountains." Clara spun toward Emily, raising the gun with murderous intent. "Get away from those controls immediately." But Emily was already moving, her small hands reaching for the emergency override switch. Clara fired, the gunshot deafeningly loud in the confined space. The bullet shattered the window beside Emily's head, sending glass fragments flying like deadly confetti and causing explosive decompression that made everyone's ears pop painfully. Emily screamed, but didn't stop. She grabbed the emergency override switch and activated it, transferring limited flight control authority to the passenger compartment's backup systems. "Now, Daddy, take the controls." Ryan threw himself toward the emergency flight controls as Clara fired again. This bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending blood spraying across the cockpit instruments. But his momentum carried him to the emergency flight control panel, his hands finding the backup controls that could override Clara's piloting. The aircraft lurched violently as three different people fought for control. Clara at the primary pilot controls, Ryan at the emergency override system, and Emily manning the backup communications equipment with the determination of someone far older than her years. "Mayday, mayday," Emily shouted into the backup radio system. "This is Emily Carter broadcasting on emergency frequency. The pilot is trying to crash the plane. She murdered my mommy, and now she's trying to kill my daddy. Please help us." The fighter escort immediately responded, Colonel Martinez's voice cutting through the chaos with professional calm. "Roger, Emily. We copy your distress call. We're here to help you. Is there anything you can do to help your father control the aircraft?" Emily looked at her father, blood streaming from his shoulder wound, fighting Clara for control of the aircraft while alarms blared and warning lights flashed throughout the cockpit. "I can try, sir. I've been studying aircraft systems since I was 5 years old." She moved to the co-pilot position with impressive agility, her small hands finding the secondary flight controls. Despite her age, Emily had spent countless hours in flight simulators, had absorbed technical knowledge that many adults never mastered, understood aircraft systems with an intuitive brilliance that surpassed formal training. Clara abandoned her position at the primary controls, lunging toward Emily with desperate, animalistic fury. "You manipulative little witch. You've destroyed everything. Everything I worked for, everything I planned." But Ryan caught Clara's wrist just as she reached for Emily, the two adults grappling for control of the weapon, while Emily tried to maintain aircraft stability. The plane pitched and rolled wildly, diving toward the mountainous terrain that Clara had planned to use as their grave. "Emily!" Ryan shouted over the chaos of alarms, gunfire, and struggling bodies. "The autopilot system. Can you engage the autopilot to stabilize our flight path?" Emily's hands flew over the controls with impressive precision, her face set with concentration that looked far too mature for an 8-year-old child. "I'm trying, Daddy." But she damaged some of the systems when she was sabotaging the plane. Some of the controls aren't responding properly. The gun discharged again, this time the bullet lodging in the aircraft's ceiling and causing additional damage to critical systems. Clara and Ryan crashed into the aircraft's instrument panel, still fighting for the weapon while Emily worked frantically to keep them airborne. "Colonel Martinez," Emily called to the fighter escort, her voice remarkably steady despite the chaos surrounding her. "Can you guide me through emergency landing procedures? My daddy's hurt really bad, and the mean lady broke some of the airplane's important parts." "Negative, Emily," came the colonel's voice, filled with admiration and concern. "You're too small to safely land that aircraft under normal circumstances, let alone in an emergency situation. But we can guide you through the steps to keep it stable and level until we can get you to an airport with emergency services standing by." Emily nodded grimly, her small hands remarkably steady on the controls despite the violence erupting around her. She was her mother's daughter and her father's child. Courage and intelligence combined in a package that absolutely refused to surrender to despair or fear. Clara broke free from Ryan's grip, raising the gun toward Emily with murderous determination. "If I can't have Ryan's company and his money, then nobody gets to have anything." But as she fired, Ryan summoned his last reserves of strength and threw himself between the gun and his daughter. The bullet meant for Emily caught him in the chest, spinning him backward and sending him crashing into the aircraft's bulkhead. "Daddy!" Emily screamed, her voice breaking with terror and grief. Ryan collapsed, but managed to grab Clara's ankle as she moved toward Emily for the finishing shot. With strength born of paternal desperation, he pulled Clara off balance, sending her crashing into the damaged flight controls. The gun flew from her hands, sliding across the floor as the plane pitched violently toward the unforgiving mountains below. Emily fought the aircraft controls with every ounce of strength in her small body, her father's blood spreading across the floor beside her, Clara unconscious against the bulkhead. The 8-year-old girl was alone with a damaged aircraft flying over mountains, with military escort trying to guide her safety. "Emily, this is Colonel Martinez. I need you to listen very carefully. Can you see the horizon line outside the window?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Keep the aircraft wings level with that line. Don't worry about anything else right now. Just keep those wings level." Emily's hands shook on the controls, but she followed instructions. Her father had taught her basic flight principles during their many hangar visits, never imagining she'd use that knowledge to save their lives. "Emily, what's your father's condition?" Emily risked a glance at Ryan. He was breathing, but unconscious, blood seeping from multiple wounds. "He's hurt really bad. There's lots of blood." "Okay, sweetheart. Help is coming. We're vectoring you toward the nearest airport. The runway is long and clear. All you have to do is keep the plane stable." Behind her, Clara was stirring, groaning as consciousness returned. Emily's heart pounded with terror. What if Clara woke up and tried to hurt them again? "Colonel Martinez, the bad lady is waking up." "Roger, Emily. Is there anything you can use to secure her?" Emily looked around desperately. The aircraft was equipped with emergency restraints for medical evacuations. Moving as quickly as she dared while maintaining control, Emily managed to secure Clara's hands with the medical restraints. Clara's eyes opened, focusing on Emily with venomous hatred. "You little..." "Shut up," Emily said with surprising firmness. "You killed my mommy and hurt my daddy. The police are going to put you in jail forever." "The airport is in sight, Emily," Colonel Martinez reported. "You're going to see lights ahead of you. That's the runway. Do you see it?" Emily peered through the cracked windscreen. In the distance, she could see lights arranged in long lines, the most beautiful sight she'd ever seen. "I see it. Outstanding. Now, Emily, landing is going to be the hardest part, but you're not alone. There are emergency crews waiting, and we're going to talk you through every step." As they approached the airport, Emily could see fire trucks and ambulances lining the runway. Mrs. Rosa would be there too, Emily knew. Mrs. Rosa, who had protected their family, who had helped gather evidence, who had been the true guardian angel all along. "Emily, reduce power slightly. Pull back on the throttles just a little." Emily followed instructions, feeling the aircraft slow. Her father stirred slightly, his eyes opening. "Daddy," Emily. Ryan's voice was weak but alert. "You're flying the plane?" "The bad lady tried to crash us, but Colonel Martinez is helping me land." "Are you okay?" Ryan tried to sit up, wincing from his wounds. "I'm okay, sweetheart. You saved us. You saved us both. We're not down yet, Daddy." Ryan managed to pull himself to the co-pilot's seat, his hands joining Emily's on the controls. Together, father and daughter brought the aircraft down in a landing that would never win awards for smoothness, but succeeded in the only way that mattered. They survived. The plane bounced twice before settling on the runway, fire trucks and medical personnel rushing toward them as they finally rolled to a stop. As paramedics loaded Ryan onto a stretcher and police took Clara into custody, Emily finally broke down and cried. Not from fear or pain, but from relief and exhaustion and the overwhelming weight of what they'd all been through. Mrs. Rosa appeared beside the stretcher, her weathered hands gentle on Emily's face. "Mija, you were so brave. Your mama will be so proud. I used everything you taught me, Mrs. Rosa, about watching people, about recording evidence, about being smarter than the bad people think." Mrs. Rosa smiled through her own tears. "You used everything your mama taught you too. And your papa, you're the best of both of them." As they wheeled Ryan toward the ambulance, he reached out to catch Emily's hand. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you at first. I'm sorry I almost. It's okay, Daddy. You believe me now. That's what matters." "Always," Ryan whispered. "From now on, I'll always believe you." 6 months later, Emily Carter sat in the co-pilot's seat of a small training aircraft, her hands confident and steady on the controls as her father guided her through increasingly complex maneuvers. The morning sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, and Emily felt the familiar thrill of flight that had been passed down through generations of her family. Ryan's physical wounds had healed completely, though he would always carry small scars from that terrible day. But the deeper wounds, the ones in their relationship, the ones in their ability to trust and love without reservation, had healed as well, leaving them stronger than they'd ever been before. "Looking absolutely perfect," Ryan said, watching his daughter handle the aircraft with natural skill that surpassed many adult pilots. "Your control inputs are smooth, your situational awareness is excellent, and your decision-making is sophisticated beyond your years. I think you're ready for your first solo flight simulation." "Really?" Emily's eyes lit up with excitement that transformed her entire face. "You think I'm ready?" "I think you've been ready for a while," Ryan replied with a smile. "But first, we have a promise to keep." They landed at the small municipal airport near their new home, the house that had once belonged to Sarah's mother, where Sarah had grown up, where Emily's grandmother had taught her daughter the same values of courage and determination that Sarah had passed on to Emily. The house was filled with Sarah's presence again, her photographs, her books, her garden lovingly maintained by Mrs. Rosa, her recipes still used in the kitchen where 3 generations of women had shared their dreams and fears. Mrs. Rosa had moved in permanently after the events of that day, no longer just a housekeeper or nanny, but family in every sense that mattered. She was Emily's grandmother, Ryan's advisor, and the keeper of their family's history and wisdom. "Mija," Mrs. Rosa called from the kitchen window, her voice carrying across the yard with the warmth that had sustained their family through every crisis. "How was your flying lesson today? Daddy says I'm ready for solo simulation." Emily called back, running toward the house with the unbridled joy of a child who felt completely safe and loved. Ryan followed more slowly, savoring the sight of his daughter running toward home, toward safety, toward a future that was once again filled with infinite possibility. The house stood solid and welcoming, its windows glowing with warm light, its garden blooming with flowers that Sarah had planted years ago. Clara was serving multiple consecutive life sentences for Sarah's murder and the attempted murders of Ryan and Emily. Herbert had been sentenced to 25 years as an accessory to murder and conspiracy to commit fraud. The company had been restructured with new security protocols, a board of directors that included Mrs. Rosa as a special advisor, and a foundation dedicated to aviation safety that would bear Sarah's name. Emily had become something of a celebrity in aviation circles. The 8-year-old girl who had saved lives through courage, intelligence, and an absolute refusal to be silenced. But she handled the attention with remarkable grace, always insisting that she'd had help from her family, always crediting Mrs. Rosa's wisdom and her parents' teachings. "You know what the best part about our new life is?" Emily said that evening as they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors while Mrs. Rosa prepared dinner in the kitchen. "What's that, sweetheart? We're all together now. Really together. You, me, Mrs. Rosa, and Mommy's memory. Like a real family is supposed to be." Ryan felt tears start, but they were healing tears, tears of gratitude rather than grief. "Your mama would be so proud of you, Emily. So proud of how brave you were, how smart you were, how you refused to give up even when everything seemed impossible. I think she was there with us," Emily said quietly, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had faced death and emerged stronger. "In the airplane, when everything was scary and I didn't know if we were going to survive, I could feel her helping me be strong. I could feel her showing me what to do." Mrs. Rosa emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of hot chocolate and homemade cookies, settling beside them on the porch with the comfortable presence of someone who belonged completely. "Your mama is always with us, Mija, in our hearts, in our memories, in the courage we find when we need it most, and in the love we share with each other." Emily curled up between her father and Mrs. Rosa, safe and loved and completely at home. The evening was perfect. Warm air, gentle breeze, the sound of crickets beginning their nightly chorus, and the absolute security of being surrounded by people who would protect her no matter what. "Daddy, yes, sweetheart. If anyone ever tries to hurt our family again, I'll be ready. I'll always be ready." Ryan smiled, ruffling his daughter's hair with infinite tenderness. "Next time, we'll all be ready together. But for now, let's just enjoy being safe and happy and home." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Emily made a wish on the brightest star she could see, not for adventure or excitement, but for this moment to last forever. The three of them together, safe and loved and home, with Sarah's memory blessing their new beginning. The little girl who had stopped a millionaire's flight with nothing but courage and truth had learned the most important lesson of all, that families built on love and honesty could survive anything the world threw at them. And someday, when Emily was older, she would carry that lesson forward, protecting her own family with the same fierce determination that had saved her father's life. High above them, in the vast star-filled sky that Emily would one day navigate as a professional pilot, Sarah's spirit seemed to smile down on the family that had learned not just to survive, but to thrive in the face of unimaginable challenges. They were home, they were safe, they were together, and they were stronger than ever before. The bonds of family, forged in love and tested by fire, become unbreakable. If this story of courage, wisdom, and the power of never giving up touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to remember that even the smallest voices can change everything. Like this video if you believe in the strength of family. Subscribe for more stories about love conquering all. And remember, every child deserves to be heard. Every family deserves to heal. And every ending can be a new beginning when we have the courage to fight for what matters most.